When it comes to the shape of modern business, few forces have had more impact than government regulation. From environmental laws to bank capital requirements, official standards have set the parameters of what groups can do. Rules also create arbitrage opportunities across sectors and across national lines. Joining me today to discuss the importance of regulation for business is Barney Reynolds, partner at the global law firm of Sherman & Sterling. Barney, historically, regulation has been one of the most important parameters for businesses in determining how and what they can do. Can you give us some examples from the financial services industry, which is where you specialize, on the importance of regulation in shaping what businesses do?
Sure. There have been rules developed predominantly in the 20th century and still evolving on how financial institutions sell products that they make to consumers and to other businesses. And there have been regulations dating back to the 1930s on the shape of the industry to stop, for instance, banks being too closely connected with investment banks under the Glass-Steagall reforms of the 1930s, which were sort of unwound towards the end of the 20th century to the regret of many people, because the removal of those restrictions was attributed as being one of the possible causes of the credit crunch.
And of course, regulation doesn't just say what people can't do. It also, by setting the rules of what's legal, helps create arbitrage opportunities and create new business models. And we see that happening today.
We do. Regulation, inevitably, when you're dealing with financial services and products which are hugely complicated, involves the governments making choices through rules as to how industry needs to be structured, how organizations need to behave, and so on. And by doing that, they create opportunities. So, for instance, there have been some laws most recently enacted pursuant to G20 initiatives and further to the crisis, requiring derivatives trades, derivatives being seen as quite dangerous products, ultimately to end up being conducted with huge central depositories internationally, which match and stand in between the parties to the trade and are very heavily capitalized and carefully monitored and so on. That, on the one hand, reduces certain business opportunities that were being undertaken before without these central counterparties. On the other, it provides new opportunities for people involved in the new system that's created as a result of the new rules.
And of course, it's not just financial services where rules play a crucial part. We see in manufacturing, for example, that food standards, environmental laws, labor laws, pure safety laws govern how much businesses have to spend on paying their workers, on making sure their processes are safe, on the fact that they're not dumping stuff into the local river. And they clearly govern profit margins. And they essentially exist both in financial services and elsewhere to stand for the proposition that there is a broader system, that an individual manufacturer doing what's a perfectly rational thing for them to do, which is pay as little as possible, dump the pollutants, is actually harming something more important. And so regulation actually stands to protect what's known as the commons, the sort of common good. And in that area, we've found that if there isn't enough regulation to make sure that the common good is protected, things can go haywire, as happened in the 2008 financial crisis. Right, even now, we're still reacting to that crisis, and we see more regulations that are in place seeking to shape an industry. What do you think are the most likely things that are going to have an impact on the shape of financial services in the next couple of years?
First of all, ongoing reforms to the capital requirements for banks and financial institutions generally. So their activities are going to be dampened. They have to have more equity invested in them, raise more debt, which inevitably reduces the amount of their outgoings. And so that has a huge economic impact, as is well discussed. In addition, there are ongoing there's an ongoing project to introduce more and more restrictions and rules around how these institutions interoperate with each other and how they interact with consumers, dampening the sort of things they can offer. And reducing choice, arguably, for the consumer, but arguably also protecting the consumer by ensuring that there are certain well-defined things that each of us can buy that have certain promised performance results that we can anticipate, and so that people aren't wrong-footed by the small print and by surprises down the line.
So essentially, the hidden hand of regulation is affecting, what kind of bacon I can buy, and also what kind of life insurance my children will need to buy in the future.
Absolutely.
So I think if one had to pick among the 50 great ideas of business, regulation is one that one can't ignore. Thanks so much for joining us, Barney, to discuss the importance of regulation to the shape of business in the past and in the future.